Hello, everybody trickling in. We're just going to give it a couple minutes here, let folks join the call. But in the meantime, please enjoy this AI-generated asset management groove in the background.
It's okay to dance.
See if I can fade it out now. All righty, everybody. Thanks again for joining the webinar today. We're excited to talk to everybody today. We got a couple special guests on the call joining us. Today, we're going to be unpacking hardware asset management and enterprise asset management on the ServiceNow platform. So again, hi, everybody. I'm Rich Cheek, solution consultant here with ServiceNow. I specialize in all of our asset management products here on the platform, from hardware, software, but today, we wanted to talk about enterprise asset management as well. So I brought two specialists on the call who would like to say hello. So Lillian, David.
Hi, I'm Lillian Avilas. I am a senior solutions consultant, Enterprise East. My specialty is EAM, but I'm part of the whole team with HAM, SAM, and cloud management. I've been with ServiceNow for almost a year, coming from a partner. And I have also been a practitioner of ServiceNow with clients. And my IT background is pretty extensive. And when I'm not doing this, I'm jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. So, David?
Hey everybody, I'm David Robinson. I am a senior solution consultant here at ServiceNow. Been with the company for about 2 years, but prior to that, I was actually a practitioner in the ITAM space at a customer. I was working on the platform, doing asset management, software asset management, hardware asset management, kind of in all different various degrees of kind of implementation. I started kind of with the spreadsheets and then moved all the way up into HAM Pro and SAM Pro and all that fun stuff. I specialize in the manufacturing space right now. I actually came from an auto manufacturer, so it's kind of cool to be here talking about EAM. We see a lot from the manufacturing space around EAM, so happy to be here today and get kind of deeper into the product.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining. I think we see some people dropping locations in the chat. Someone's coming in from Switzerland, so welcome from across the Atlantic. But Lily and David, where are you from again? I don't know if you've mentioned that on the call.
Well, I'm from sunny Florida, and we have a little hurricane coming through. So, if I get blown away, I just want to say it's nice to know you.
The commitment, right? During the hurricane, right?
Absolutely. Dedication.
Yeah. I'm nowhere near as cool. I'm actually located in southern New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia.
Awesome.
Jersey Shore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, as we usually do, just to flash up the safe harbor slide, we've all seen this on the call. I don't think we're gonna have too much forward looking on the call, but just in case we do discuss some features that are in upcoming releases, just, don't make any investing decisions. Things may push, but we're excited to talk to you today. So with that said, we're going to kick it off the way we normally do and have a little sip of wine on the call. So Lily and David, I hope you brought some wines today, but I guess I'll set the stage. So I walked into the wine distributor today, the beer distributor, and wasn't really sure what to grab. And the first thing that jumped out at me was this Ironside bourbon-aged red wine blend. I normally drink more traditional wines, but something about it was speaking to me. So with that said, I'm going to have my first sip of it and let you know what I think.
Awesome. And so I put mine in a jug, guys, and Profit Sauvignon Blanc, there's no point in sipping when I
Yeah. So I'm not getting much bourbon out of it. It tastes pretty much just like a red wine blend, but not bad. Not bad. So Lillian, you said you've got yours in a jug. I think Michelle will often have hers in what she likes to call a sippy cup as well. But what are your impressions of your wine?
Oh, I love Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc. It's very light, smooth, and delicious. You just want to have more.
Awesome.
I wasn't as adventurous today. I didn't go to the wine store. I actually just went down to my to my kitchen and kind of poked around. We are red wine drinkers in our house, but we are completely out of red. I was actually cooking with the last bottle of it earlier in the week and killed it. So I have a Decoy Chardonnay from 2019. Oh, the background's picking it up there, but I'm surprised it was this old, actually. I didn't realize we had it here in the house. I had to do a quick Google on it because I think this was the wine that was the first production run after all the fires out in Sonoma County. So everyone was like super concerned about the wine out there when that happened and like what the quality was going to be. So apparently this has been sitting in the back of my cabinet since then. So I will take a sip and let you know.
Careful now.
Mm,
Yeah.
quite good.
Oh,
It's
Yeah.
survived the back of the cabinet.
Yeah. Yeah, it did.
But, you typically store it in a dark, cool, dry place, right? Out of the light so it doesn't degrade. So maybe that's where you should keep it from now on, right?
yes, and it goes great with a filet mignon and some mashed potatoes.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you to the folks that have answered the poll up on the screen about what's your wine of choice. We do get a kick out of reading them at the end of the webinar. But again, why are we here? We're trying to build a community around asset management on the ServiceNow platform. As folks who have lived on the platform as either practitioners, developers, implementers, whatever you want to call it, we like to be able to share our stories and also the capabilities of the ServiceNow platform. So with that said, just a little quick agenda on what we're going to be doing today. We're going to again hit on a few of the major goals of asset management as a practice, dive into a little bit about your traditional hardware asset management. We've spoke about that on this webinar series a few times, and then take a deeper dive into what enterprise asset management is, and then do a little demo overview of that, talk about some upcoming events. And as always, at the end of the call, we like to kick it over to the community and let you ask questions and see what's going on out there. So with that said, let us dive into the goals of asset management, right? So every organization, they've got goals around it, but if you distilled them out, I think most companies will agree that whatever you're trying to manage, whether it's a computer or a truck or software, there's some pretty typical goals across that, right? We want to try to save money as an organization. I don't know any company that really wants to keep spending more and more and more, right? We want to look at maximizing that useful life, that asset loss in your inventory to really drive down that spend and be as efficient as we can. In the lens of efficiency, we want to operate better. And this is paramount, both, with your traditional IT hardware, getting it out to folks as they need it so they could do their jobs. But I mean, even more so if we're talking about a manufacturing space, right? When a floor time goes down, you lose an asset, you don't do your maintenance on it, it's insurmountable, that loss. Mitigating risk, right? I think just knowing what you have, where it is, will help prevent a lot of those outages. And, just a great user experience. Our customers today we're all used to shopping on Amazon, right? We could get something to our door in minutes. And the employees at our organizations are kind of demanding the same. I mean, David Lillian, what are you feeling about that? What are you hearing from our customers?
I always go back to the pandemic. We actually talked about that during the session that we did, the practitioner workshop. God, was that yesterday? Day before? I'm a bit of a time warp, so I'm traveling a bit. But just from a ham perspective, right? Going back to like the asset, that side of the coin, or even SAM, going back to those things around when the pandemic hit and everyone was trying to get remote as fast as possible, and companies were just throwing hardware out, at people like, you need a laptop, I'll get you a laptop, and then kind of when things settled down and we're looking at more people going back into the office now, we can track that better. But what happened to all that stuff in the meantime? Everyone was just trying to solve the problem and not track the assets. They want people working and being productive. So if you can think back to a time around the pandemic when like you didn't have good asset control and asset management, there can be a lot of waste happening there in those budgets just because it was like a reactionary situation. I can speak back to my experience. We already had all that stood up, so we knew where everything was, even though everyone was remote. When the pandemic hit for us, we kind of got lucky. We were preparing for stuff like snowstorms and things like that to make sure all this stuff worked when everyone was at home. And then management came to us and was like, "What are you going to do?" And we were like, "Just send everybody home." We got it, so it's a great place to be in. Not everyone's there, but that's what I think about all that loss of like software licensing and just falling into that black hole and the costs associated with that.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And I think part of that is tooling, right? You were using the ServiceNow platform at that time. You had a lot of capabilities there, but part of it was, like we said earlier, building a practice around it. You put process to manage that and really spun it up there. So no, that's a great story here. And I think one that most folks on this call can probably relate to in one way or another. So, just driving back into this a little bit more, like what can the ServiceNow platform manage? It's really anything. I think we probably have showed this slide on this webinar a few times, but it's a great place to kind of kick off these conversations, right? In the traditional realm, ServiceNow, we're known for managing your IT infrastructure, right? We started with the ITSM suite and managing desktops being deployed, servers, network infrastructure. Our discovery systems would discover, information that's out there, tracking software assets. But recently, we've expanded to really, managing an asset, just bar none, whatever that is. So, I mean, Lillian, if you want to expand on what kind of capabilities we have with just managing enterprise assets and kind of why we're looking at that as a platform approach.
Well, with enterprise asset management, whether they're connected or not connected, it's having the visibility into what it is you have, where it's at, the usefulness of it, the life cycle, being able to identify your cost with the assets, where you can save. So we're going to touch upon some total cost of ownership, show you some insight as to how you can better plan moving forward based on the cost that's involved in purchasing these assets and making better business decisions moving forward. So we'll get deeper into it. And I just wanted to touch on that, on how enterprise asset is everything else.
Everything else. That's a great way to put it. But just because it's everything else, ServiceNow shares that common data model across it. So, you're going to be managing these assets in the same platform that you can manage hardware assets. You don't have to have separate tools communicating with each other, because as we'll probably see a little bit later, an enterprise asset will often have a computer attached to it. It will have that traditional hardware IT approach, with that. It can be discovered through different monitoring tools and brought into your CMDB. So it's, it's a great place to live in a common data model over there. So
I'll give you a quick example. You
yeah.
have lab companies that have the computer that controls the magnifying glass, because everything is digital, and then images go onto the computer. So better together, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've
Yeah,
all go ahead,
Go ahead,
David.
Rich. I was gonna say, one thing to think about here too, like we talk about that, like that platform of like orchestrating work. When you talk about like IT asset management, software, hardware, cloud, we always talk about onboarding and offboarding, right? The employees coming in and out, and like, oh, hardware, they get a laptop, well, like, what about that desk? What about the cubicle that they're in? Maybe the employee has a standing desk due to pre-existing medical condition or something like that. Like that can all be now taken into account because it's all on the platform and we can track all that stuff, which is kind of awesome to think about that. Like if you're hiring an employee, you can kind of do that full end-to-end experience from all the stuff that they need to touch on a daily basis, not just like the laptop and the software stack and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And another quick story is, what about the VPs who like to have those Monets or those Van Goghs hanging in their office? Well, spend $10,000 a pop, they could just do a reprint or G-Clay and then have a stack of them in storage and then be able to distribute them accordingly. So it could be anything asset.
Yeah, definitely. And I see just some questions in the chat asking for slides and recordings. When you signed up for this webinar, we've got your email address. After the call, we do send up a follow-up. We send a follow-up out where we do send the recording and the slide deck, along with invitations to future webinar series. So please feel free to, come back again, come tune in monthly to this webinar series, but we will definitely follow up with that information after this call. Awesome. So just to tackle, hardware asset management again on the platform and parallels to enterprise assets here, we're talking about managing the full life cycle from the point that you procure an asset or even think about procuring an asset to the point where it's time to retire that, where you're going to, have a pile of equipment and you have to do something with it. We can help with, the fulfillment of those requests, ties into procurement applications and systems that you may have today, monitor those assets, and then, make sure that they're working day to day. So, just some of the different features and functionalities on HAM Pro with ServiceNow. A lot of the customers on this call may be an ITSM consumer here today. You do have some asset management capabilities there. You can track your assets, model records, do some stockroom management, and then get some foundational purchase orders into the system. And that's a great place to start. When customers are talking about building a hardware asset management practice on the platform and asking what they could do today, oftentimes that's where I'll point them to. Start working on your procurement process. Look at the models that you might want to bring in for common requests, things of that nature. But as we start to move up into our professional suite of functionality here. We've got a lot of pre-built workflows to help you manage those different events in an asset lifecycle. So whether you're looking at an asset refresh, auditing different locations, and integrating with shipping trackers, we have a bunch of different functionality that we could kind of dive into and to help you manage those hardware assets. From there, we get our kind of foundational flow of data through the platform for hardware assets. And this really ties into, the notion of discovering them into the platform, whether that's through an automated tool, Microsoft SCCM, ServiceNow Discovery, requesting assets through the procurement process, maybe bulk orders at a refresh time. That's going to come into the ServiceNow platform. We then have that content service to help you normalize that data and make sense of it. We guide you with some life cycle information about those assets so you could make better business decisions, and then ultimately manage that full life cycle, right, from the point of request to retirement. So, the focus of this webinar is not so much to go deep dive into HAM or EAM, but start to then call out where we have differentiators between the two and why you might look at one solution or another. So to kind of set that foundation, I mean, David, Lillian, anything you'd like to add in the lens of hardware asset management on the platform?
I don't think so. Rich, you did a great job.
I think so too.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Awesome. So now for what I think a lot of folks came today to hear about is, what is enterprise asset management? And with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand it over to our two experts
Yeah,
here.
I'll take this one. I mean, you can obviously see the life cycle there is very, very similar to hardware asset management, and that's pretty intentional because we understand in the enterprise that these life cycles are very, very similar. But to go back to what we talked about earlier about those other types of assets, right? So EAM is sort of everything else in terms of those assets in your environment. And the objectives are very, very similar, understanding what you own in the environment, streamlining those processes to plan, acquire, deploy, maintain those assets. And then make sure I use the term right sizing. Probably not the best term in the world, but using those assets properly and making sure they're deployed out there. Much like in HAM, you don't want to be putting out laptops or buying laptops every time you need a new one. You want to be bringing them back, refurbing them, sending them back out, et cetera, to make sure you're getting the most out of those assets. So the same thing here applies with EAM, and EAM is kind of a different a beast a little bit in terms of how we handle that. There are some unique functionalities in EAM that HAM doesn't get just by nature of the business around those pieces. Lynn, do you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. So I try to simplify it. So you have your administrative side of the house and you have the operation side of the house. And from an administrative perspective, your employees need the tools to do their job. So they get their computer, they get their software, and they have the ability to do the administrative things. And then you have the operations side of the house. That would be, let's say you have the plant floor, robotics, whatever the equipment is that you use to produce the product that you're trying to sell to the consumer, or other vendors, et cetera. So it's kind of like a relational thing where you need both to really manage the entire company and the business model. So I'm a true believer in, hey, get it all and make sure it's in one location, one true source, one place to have all the information you need to accomplish your job and generate revenue.
Awesome. Awesome. No, I love to hear that. I love to hear that. I do see some questions out here in the chat. I think we might get to some of those answers here in a minute. So Josh, I saw you post a few out there. So let's keep rolling through this for a moment. And if we don't feel like we've addressed them, we'll dive back into that a little bit more. So good for the next slide?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Very good.
Okay.
So go ahead, Lynn, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So, this slide we have is full lifecycle management for all asset types. And of course, each of you come from a different industry. And of course, you have your own set of assets that you're concerned about. So again, with the life cycle, you have the planning and acquisition. We have the ability to help you source that. The asset TCO, which gives you financial visibility into the particular assets from contracts, warranty, labor, how much you're purchasing it for, what is the best direction to go. I'm not going to talk about every single one, jumping into the inventory. There's plenty of times where you have a warehouse where you keep the stock or a stock room. You could even have a person as a stockroom, so to speak, because maybe they're attached to a particular vehicle and you have the stock that's with them going around mobily. We have stock rules that are in place so that you never have to worry about running out of assets, parts, or the whole assets itself. You can transfer stock from location to location. It can be controlled by distribution channels, what locations are serviced. You can do loaner assets so that you have something on standby just in case something breaks. You can quickly move it over to that location from an in-use perspective. You can swap out assets that are either compatible or a substitute of a particular asset. You can sync with the CMDB. We have the asset maintenance. Better Together, we have other products that can do the dispatching portion of it, but that's a whole nother show, by the way. But we do inspections, maintenance plans, safety recalls, preventive maintenance, and then, of course, most important, the end of life, being compliant depending on the industry that you're in. How do you dispose of these assets? What do you do with the asset? Can you resell it and get some kind of return on your investment? What is the refresh rate for something that needs to be replaced without losing the space? We have a particular use case where the provider wants that same space. They don't want to lose it. And so they use the refresh workflow in order to maintain that position. So there's more to come as we move forward and do this particular program. We are going to have an EAM special practitioners webinar, David and I. And David, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that we'll talk about that kind of at the end. We'll plug that. But I mean, today we're really talking about sort of I think I said it in some of our conversations earlier. This is sort of EAM 101, right? Understanding what the differentiators are between EAM and HAM. And the goal with the following webinar is, kind of separate from what Rich and Michelle do on a monthly basis, is to really kind of dive deeper into EAM and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it. So next month we'll do kind of the 102. We'll get a little bit deeper. We'll talk about workflow and some deeper things on the platform around EAM, and then hopefully we can get some feedback from that and kind of build out around those asks from the community around it as we start to kind of go further down that road.
And I think you said it right there, David. Like, this is intended to show some of the biggest differentiators of EAM, right? And there's no right or wrong answer to what the biggest differentiator is to that. But what do you feel like, is one of the bigger differentiators of the two tools?
The big one for me is actually kind of the question Josh brought up, is the multi-component asset stuff and maintenance and how that all sort of feeds into those enterprise assets. Because, I came from infrastructure, I came from IT, and when we would do break fix or something like that, we'd have to go out and repair somebody's laptop. I was an endpoint guy. It was always like, oh, we had to get an RMA done. These got a warranty on it. Things like that. We didn't track those parts. They were handled by a warranty. Typically, we kept things under lease in most cases, and concurrent warranties and stuff. But with EAM, we can kind of expand that use case around that. And I'll put my manufacturing cap on just because that's kind of the world I live in. But like, think about like a conveyor belt. It's got like a motor and a belt, and you may have an in-house support team that fixes those things to keep that factory that uses that conveyor belt running. If that conveyor belt goes down, the company's losing money. So that's where kind of like the work order parts and maintenance and things come into play, and all of those pieces. That's the big differentiator, at least in my mind. But it also plays to smaller use cases. Again, kind of putting on my previous life hat, I remember being an IT guy and someone came over and said, "Hey, the microwave's broken. Can you fix it?" And I was like, that's facilities, but I could point you in the right direction. So same thing there, but on a smaller scale. Facilities is an important component, and they handle these types of EAM related objects. So that's the big differentiator. But to have it all in one platform is huge, because it's this that sort of single pane of glass that's bringing all those resources in. Yeah,
no, that's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, from an employee's perspective, if they need a new chair, why do they, like, if they could go to the same portal to request that, that'd be wonderful, right? As their laptops or whatever other requests they're putting in. Sweet. Yep. So, I mean, this is a little bit of word salad, right? Word soup on a screen, but to call out some of the big features and functionality differentiators, I think they're outlined here. So Lillian, I mean, talk us through the top 3 things that are jumping out, this kind of a list at you.
Well, parts sourcing, pickup, drop off. You have the ability for safety recalls. The manufacturer lets you know, hey, this particular product we have some concerns with, and you can just put out there and recall all of those items and do a refresh and give them a different type of asset. For instance, like a fetal monitor, the risk is very high. You don't want the fetal monitor going down. So if the manufacturer goes ahead and says, hey, we're recalling that fetal monitor, you want to make sure that you get it replenished with the right fetal monitor so that there's no risk and, you know, there's no situation with anybody losing their life, God forbid. The Google Map integration, the linear assets is awesome. So imagine every road that you drive on, okay? We can help whomever manages it, of course, usually the city or the county, and they could identify in segments the particular area of a block, and then all of the discrete assets associated with it might be a sign or the street lights. It might be, oh, David, let's think of some other things. The maybe a rail on a sidewalk, right?
Could be the
Yeah.
cable buried under the road, or the
Mile
pipelines buried under
markers.
the road.
All
Yeah.
the utility lines,
Yeah.
the work management, the part sourcing, taps into the stock rules. So do you want your technicians running out of parts? Definitely not. So we can set it where, you know, some people get concerned, well, I don't want, you know, things just being ordered, you know, but we order in a blanket PO. So we have the ability to trigger the request. It goes to the blanket PO, and no, we're not replacing your ERP system. We're integrating with it so that it's you don't have swivel chairs. Again, you go into just one place and all the information is bilateral and you have the ability to see it all. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me. What about you, David?
The one thing I wanted to call out was actually the design for non-IT personas. You know, when we think of IT, we think of incidents, right, and problems and changes and things like that. In you know, the facilities world, it's a work order or, you know, something along those lines. They don't speak the same language that IT speaks in those contexts. So it's built for that. And that's the idea, you know, part of the reason EAM exists, because this is a completely different set of, you know, users, these personas that we're working with. They do different stuff. It's similar, but it's definitely not the same. I know I've had a lot of conversations when I talk with people who handle enterprise assets. The conversation is always very, very nuanced. A hardware asset management conversation is very easy to be like, oh, I've got servers, I've got networking stuff, I've got a couple of other things. You know, that's easy to manage. We do it, you know, we do it in HAM Pro. Here's how you do it. Here's the outcomes. Enterprise assets, you know, I keep saying it's everything, but it's everything. I've dealt with, you know, food processors who have food processing equipment. Construction companies, you know, it's everything under the sun. It could be something with a diesel engine. It could be something that mixes food.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because when you talk to these customers, the use cases are so broad with EAM.
Yeah. I think the coolest linear ass one, at least in my perspective, that I heard was a company that built racetracks and managed racetracks, right? And all the different safety components and different things that had to be up on those you know, for those events that they laid them out on that type of you know, a map, if you would, across a point-to-point map. So I thought that was pretty cool. I just like car racing too. So anyway, with that said, I think we hit on a lot of these, right, team? The
Yeah.
list of
I mean, this
assets that are out
particular
there.
slide is crazy because we couldn't fit everything on here. So there's more to come. So many different use cases from HVACs. A lot of people are like, well, we don't service our HVACs, but don't you want to know what systems you have in the different buildings that are there and be able to collaborate and work with the vendor that you're utilizing? So we can also track through reporting, you know, the KPIs. You can pull in the vendor information. You can identify what the labor cost is, the different contracts that you have with them. I mean, the list is endless. And drones, how fun is that? A company that has all drones. I'm actually working with one right now, and they deliver products using drones. I mean, what a great use case. So, and then of course you have weapons too. I mean, we take it to the limits here. So what about you, David? What do you think of this slide?
It's amazing with all the stuff in here. And like I said earlier, the use cases are so broad. And I think that's why EAM's so great, because it's quite flexible around those use cases, the multi-component assets and all of that, those pieces. Yeah, in the healthcare side, I've talked with healthcare companies. They want to track where their stuff is in the hospital using RFID. That's a great use case that is deployed, and you know, we have customers doing it. my life tends to be in the manufacturing area, so it's really interesting to talk about how to talk with these customers about how they're using CMMS tools that maybe are incomplete, or some of them have spreadsheets. It's crazy. Some of them, each plant has a spreadsheet, and they've got a guy, and they got a guy who can kind of put everything together. So it's really interesting to see, finally the platform's kind of coming to meet those demands to those customers.
And
Right.
I
And
think
my own personal story is I just had a new AC system put in, and I've had 3 different techs. And so the one I was talking to just yesterday, I'm like, so Ryan, did you speak with Ted? And don't you know what he did last time? He's like, no, we're not at that point. And then he gave me a 3 carbon copy document for me to sign for the work that he did. And I'm like, oh boy, you guys need us. And he's like, well, you better call Josh. And I'm like, okay, I'll be calling him real soon.
yeah, no, I know that and then you're gonna go lose those papers, and who knows who's coming next out for that. But I think that's a great segue into like, how does data get in to the ServiceNow platform, right? Customers are managing spreadsheets. Some have other inventory solutions out there. What's that story look like?
Yeah, so typical of ham, there's sort of, this is a tale of sort of 3 sources here. With ham, we always talk about that great integration with like your SCCM or using ServiceNow Discovery. With EAM, it gets a little bit different. And again, I kind of look at this all from a manufacturing bend, but we get into kind of those IoT connected assets on the shop floor, integrating with those providers like a Tenable or a Dragos to pull that information back. That's a great way to bring that data into the CMDB and understand what's on the wire. And then we also have those non-connected assets, and that could be a nut and a bolt, or it could be an entire car. Bringing that in through either like a vendor pull during an order, advanced shipment type of asset stuff, or through spreadsheet upload, things like that. And then we also have those workflows that bring stuff in as well, the asset onboarding processes to bring that data into the platform. The interesting about EAM is that we've now kind of expanded out of that kind of sphere where we really want everything discovered in that way. So there's multiple ways to bring this stuff in, but the great thing about this is that we're codifying it. We're putting it into now this, rhythm in terms of how we can get data in and how it's handled and how it's processed. We put rigidity around it. Whereas, kind of days of yore, right? It's some guy who's putting the system in, or somebody who's putting that stuff in the system and managing it manually and things like that. And now with the connected assets and then workflow, we can actually track these assets in a really great way to make sure that people are doing the work, and then when they do the work, the asset moves to that next state in its life cycle if it needs to. The workflow's keeping tabs on those types of things. So there's never a question of where something is coming and going because of those approval processes and workflows that are wrapped around it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to bring in the data. We simplify it where you can do it through asset onboarding, where you can actually create the model. And we're going to segue into the next slide about models and user assembled versus pre-assembled. But you have the ability to create the model, right? And then add the assets. So when you're doing models that are pre-assembled or user assembled, the mindset is it has a serial number or an asset tag. And so you onboard it through the portal. It can be done through, the back-end system. We have import of bulk assets with the component mindset in mind. So user assembled. The user assembled is, consumables and simple assets that you can determine which asset you want. Consumable, simple. You could also have pre-assembled or user assembled under the user assemble. So it can trickle down, and it can get pretty, how do you say, a little weeded, but we're not going to go there right now. And then you have the pre-assembled, like a car. A car is a full asset. Which asset do you want to, be focused on? You can have it where you can concentrate on the engine and the tires and maybe just the car itself, not necessarily the seats, because the seats aren't important to you. And these are all of the multi-component assets in stock, install. How are you going to retire it? What's the disposal process? How do you return it? And can it be reserved? You can reserve assets so that they're showing in stock, but nobody else can grab it because it's been reserved for somebody else. David, what are your thoughts on this?
I came from the automotive industry, so I'm thinking back to my days there, and we had a situation where the cars would come off the ship and they would have to get kind of their final outfit before they went to the retailers, the dealerships. And they had a cart and it had expensive tools on it. Like they use Snap-on and really expensive tools on these, do like trailer hitches and exhausts and things like that. They would do kind of final assembly, put the floor mats in and all that stuff. And those carts, I believe, were tracked. I don't know how they did it. It wasn't IT related at the time. And so I put my blinders on, but that was sort of a user assembled component, multi-component asset there. They had, a certain set of wrenches. They had a certain set of gloves. They had certain other tools they would need depending on the job. So it's really great that we have the ability to create these user assembled things to make work faster in terms of shift work and things like that, right? Where we're going through these processes of, I need a particular, tool set to do a certain job. That could be that cart, medical field, same situation, right? Building out like a cart for a specific purpose or something like that. And then the pre-assembled assets, obviously, fleet management and things like that. I was, again, cars, because I'm a car guy and, automotive. But going back to that thing, hey, we want to track the car, but we're really also interested in the life cycle of the brakes, making sure that they're looked at a specified interval, or that oil change is done at a certain interval, and the processes around all of that. So both great ways, in the platform to manage assets, whether it be, DIY, kind of build your own user assembled, or that pre-assembled stuff.
Yeah, so the fleet management, like you have the same trucks and you want to make sure they're all taken care of. Another quick use case is like in the hospitals. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you go to a hospital, every room has the same equipment. It has the computer, which would be ham, the software SAM. It has the cot that the computer is sitting on, and then you have the different size gloves. And I don't even know what all the other equipment is, but you guys get the point. And that can be a user assembled. You could have that package and then be able to say for room 102 and 103 on floor 7, they're all going to have these particular assets. So you can actually track it by location as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call out. We do have some like industry specific like packages, if you would, for things like clinical device management, right? So for those very common use cases where you're rolling out an ultrasound cart, right, we've got kind of a data structure built for a lot of those different industries. So if you do have an industry out there, you are curious what it might look like, reach out to your ServiceNow account teams and we could kind of help guide you on what might be the best way to manage that. But, we got to get these assets into the system somehow, right? So what kind of functionality is there for us when we bring them in?
Well, this is a great tool here. With the asset onboarding, we have what is called a playbook. So a lot of people are like, oh, what happens if, they forget to do this or forget to do that? Well, they will forget no more, because when you onboard these multiple assets, we help you step by step based on what your process is. But this particular one is out of the box, where we identify the depreciation, what are the risks involved? And keep in mind that when you're onboarding assets, you have already created the model. And as David would say, the model is like a template of information, the financial information, the risk information, the capacity information. And so as you add on the assets, should you already have the model rebuilt, I'm sorry, if you already had the model built out, that information trickles down into the asset, making it less painful for you to have to enter the information each and every time. So this is a great tool that we love having here at ServiceNow.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think without further ado, it's time to take a look at the platform, right? So team has put together a little bit of demo here. So I am going to stop the share and allow, I think Lillian's going to take that over for us.
Absolutely. Thank you,
All
Rich. Right. Okay, so let's see here. Make sure I have the right screen, and you guys give me a thumbs up. And there she is. Can you see my screen?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, so first I want to recognize that the persona for this particular demo is the administrator. We do have an asset manager, but I like being the administrator. I feel more in control. Anyway, so with that said, here we have what is called the control tower. It's the enterprise asset overview. And on this particular view, we have what are called important actions, helping you to keep your data in the system accurate, up to date, just the true source that I spoke about. And within this area, you have the carousel cards that allow you to click on the particular one. Now, be mindful that this particular one is the overview. So all of the cards that you see across in the carousel will be in alignment with the modules as I go down through them. And you would just scroll over and easily click into one to fulfill. Like for instance, this one here is missing location information. There's 8 count, and I can view the list view record and go in and make those changes. So I'm not going to dive deep into this. I'm just giving you an overview because we have plenty of more shows that will come your way where you can see the detailed information. And as David says, we will dive deeper. So bring your scuba equipment. Okay, so below that, we're going to have quick links. This is where requests are done, records are created within the instance, like asset requests, the recall orders. You want to transfer from one stockroom to another. You have transfer order lines. If there's a loaner situation, move orders for things that are in use from one location to another. And some of them are similar to the ham environment, but that's okay because our workflows may be slightly different. You can drill down by location, stockroom, model category, and classifications. So, and usually I say, are there any questions? But we'll ask those, answer those.
Yeah, throw them into the chat too. If anyone has questions, feel free to toss them in there. We've been trying to answer them as we're going along here.
Great. So David, you have anything to add on this?
No, this is a great, I always call this like the 35,000 foot view, right? I need to see what's happening now from like a high level perspective, and that's what this is all about. And then we'll kind of drill deeper into some of these other modules here on the left as we kind of get into them. But this is a great way. And I always love the carousel, those important actions. It's like the platform looking at stuff and being like, hey, you're missing something. This is something in your data estate that is important. Missing an asset tag, missing a location. Like location's a big deal. We need to know that. So it's great to have this stuff sort of brought forward in that way when you start to have this data set and are working on it on the platform. It's something that you can't get from like a spreadsheet. Just, someone's got to go into that spreadsheet, open it up, kind of filter on blank locations, and then figure that out. And then hopefully they put the right information in there, and then it doesn't this is what I love about, this view is that it's really calling out those things, right away.
And I don't know about you, but you can't drill down into Excel spreadsheets for sure. I know that. All right, so the next one we have is called the Asset Analytics page. And as it's loading, we have an overview. Here you can filter down into the location, stock rooms, and things of that sort. On this particular view, the 360 asset view, that 35,000 bird's eye view, we have here asset count by model category. We see here that their assets are eligible for refresh by model category. And you can, by clicking on like the medical devices, I don't want to see that. I click on that. Now that color goes away. I click on it again and it returns. This is all very interactive. You can click on this particular item and it will drill down into the list view. You could also see the discovered and undiscovered assets, identifying to you what's undiscovered. Hey, is there a risk there? Let's investigate and take a look at that.
The discovered and undiscovered really kind of play into what's available on the wire, so to speak. Those things that are connected devices. I also like to call this 360 asset view the director has a question view. That's my favorite sort of like my pastime. I'd be in my cubicle and someone come up behind me and tap me on the shoulder, and it'd be someone wanting to know something, and they'd be like, hey, how many we have like an asset count for like everything in the construction category, and you can quickly drill down on that through these charts. You can find that stuff. How much spend do we have in our medical devices? I love this one because it's like, is our tactical gear ready for a refresh yet?
And
I love demo data.
That's a fun one. And then, of course, most important is the life cycle. You want to get a feel for, what are your assets are available, which ones are coming up an end of life or end of sale. Also, end of support. Is it the manufacturer support? Is it internal support? Do you need to get an extended warranty? So all of this stuff, probes your mind into identifying what your needs are moving forward and how you can sustain and manage your asset environment. So Without further ado, the next one is asset TCO. I just want to pop in here real quick. This is a really cool tool. So for those of you who are contractors, construction companies, we have our CAT excavator, the 323 versus the 336. I'm not going to drill down into this. I just want to let you know we can, through the data that's in the system, so be mindful, the data that you put in, you want to make sure it's accurate and clean. And we pull back information letting you know what's a better purchase to make. We show you over a 12-month time span, what you've purchased, how much money you spent on labor repair, labor maintenance, labor general, your contracts, the parts that you bought for that particular asset. Is it worth maybe not spending as much buying that, but you spend so much money in parts and then the parts run out? Some people want to have an asset where they don't have to worry about replacing the parts all the time. How much downtime? How does it affect your bottom line? How does it affect the project that you may be working on? It comes to a standstill. So these are things to think about. Asset expense distribution. You have benchmarks, so you can decide that we're only going to spend this much money, and if we, reach it or go over it, we give you insight into all of that. So the next one I'm going to talk about is inventory. So here's the stock rules I mentioned earlier. You can go in here and you can create stock rules for a particular stock room and particular assets. You can decide what the threshold is and the order size. And remember, it doesn't just trigger and make a purchase. You can decide to just get an email and we notify you so that the ERP person maybe takes it from there. Other things we have are you have all stock rooms. You can have, like I said, a person can be a stock room so that if they have their truck and they have the parts in the truck, you can manage what they have and replenish it as they move forward. And, David, is there anything particular here you want to point out? I don't want to take too much time because this is an overview and we want you to come back for more.
Yeah, not a ton here. I always like to call it disposal. Disposal is a big one. It's big in the IT industry for like data assurance, and it can be an EAM too, depending on the device you're looking to dispose of. But think about like recycling and ESG portion, goals like corporate initiatives and things like that, where they're trying to make sure that this stuff is recycled properly or resold or something along those lines. Those workflows are built into the process. So I always like to call that out. A lot of people, once something comes off once a product kind of gets retired, people just kind of want it out of their sight. And let's just say like the oversight around it tends to get a lot looser. And I think, the platform does a good job of tracking that stuff.
Okay. And so, back to the overview, and David talked about the disposal. Again, this is the bird's eye view into everything inventory, and you have the ability to see the open assets requested, what are the recall orders, open stock. And then, of course, you have the carousel cards, and you'll notice that it just says inventory on the top because we're in the inventory section. So if you have somebody who's just focuses inventory, they'll still be able to update that data through the carousel cards going to the list view. Okay, I'm going to move on and go to enterprise asset estate. This is where I talked about my favorite linear assets. I can't tell you, every time I drive around, I'm just like, oh, that's a linear asset. And we had a use case with towers, and all of a sudden I see towers everywhere. That red car that you see driving around when you have had an experience with a red car? Well, that's what's happening to me with this. So the linear assets is a great tool to be able to identify anything, utilities underground, lights, etc. You have asset indoor mapping where you build out through Map Studio, and we'll do a session on that as well. And you get to see where your assets are at a physical location, whether it's in a room or an open space, because we also do geolocation. We also categorize by model category. So if you fall under communications, you have transportation. One might be where you are a transportation company, but you own your buildings and you have multiple locations. So you might want to have all of your transportation information under this category, but you might want to have all of your HVAC under the facility category. So you can keep things nice and neat, kind of like I call it a file cabinet of enterprise assets. So, and I always want to keep saying, any questions? I'm sure they're coming along. And then what's real important here is the risk. This gives you, from an asset perspective, the criticality of how that asset is, the likelihood of it going down, and the impact that it may have in your organization. So nobody wants downtime because it's not productive.
Mhm.
Anything you'd like to say on this page, David?
Yeah, I'd like to call it the heat map. I think it's really great. It's tied to, it can be tied to both the model or the specific asset, and it is configurable. So, this is a 4x4 out of the box, but it can be made to be 5x5, 6x6, etc. And it's really great to kind of understand from an asset perspective when something goes boom, what is it going to affect? It's really important in those, medical, manufacturing, even in something like construction or fleet management, having a truck down is lost money. So
I think every industry has that critical asset that they run on, right? It doesn't, it could be, like you said, manufacturing, it could be a school systems learning management tool, right? If you're a university, you've got classes, people can't attend them, right? That's critical out there too, from those perspectives and the infrastructure that's supporting that. So
yeah, and this is a great way to sort of grade those things as you start to get your feet wet in EAM and kind of understand where we really have problems. Because you could say something, go, oh well, yeah, the HVAC's like, I don't know, it's like 25 years old, and but it's critical if it goes down, right? I mean, that controls your whole building, and if it's a 100-degree day out and it goes down, are you going to have people into your building? Are you going to have to send workers elsewhere? So it's a great way to sort of visually understand where the risk is. And again, you can drill down on all this and kind of say, okay, I want to see everything that's a 4-3, and we can drill down on it and kind of see those things and kind of understand, what actually applies to those things, and then say, okay, well, these are the stuff we need to focus on because these are super critical to the business, and we know they're in the red now.
Yeah, and what about like just the retail stores, the grocery stores and the
refrigeration? Yep, absolutely.
And all the product that gets spoiled as a result of it. I mean, having insight into that and knowing, hey, that refrigerator is faulty. Let's go get another one out there, ASAP, and take this one back and put it in for repair. So there's so much that we give you insight into so that there's no loss and the risk is low, and the assets last longer because you're taking care of them. So I'm going to move on to the next one. And here we have model management. This, of course, is the beginnings, where you start with your assets. You want to go into the model area. And David, you think I should show that Freightliner real quick?
Yeah, I think that's good. We're kind of come up on time for the demo portion, so I think it's probably a good show.
Well, let's go on in here, and I've got my favorite little Freightliner.
Yeah, little.
Oh, she's really big. This one's 116 foot long. And basically what I did is the process that I started was, let's go in and put the model detailed information. It's pre-assembled because it's a nice 18-wheeler. I have here where I can put the view image, and what a beauty she is, right? I'd like to have a few of those. And then we go down and we show the financial information. Everybody wants to know what they're spending it on, what the depreciation is, the useful life, the expenditure type. Again, here's the failure risk, which goes back to that heat map that we were showing. We have the ability to give all of the attributes of this particular truck. And then, of course, you're not going to want to put it on the catalog for employees to buy this truck, but you can if you want to, depending on what your organization is. So that's the ability to publish that. So we move on to the components. So I'm keeping this real simple. I didn't add all of the components, but you have brakes and tires, and you want to make sure you know the quantity. And then can they be, of course, they're required. You definitely need the tires, they're required. Are they hot swappable? Can they be repaired? And these are consumables. So consumable means what? You throw it away, but you at least know how many you have. After I build all of this out, I have the assets. And when I add the assets, what the differential is a serial number and or the asset tag, depending on your organization. Of course, serial number is mandatory for this particular type of asset. It identifies the state in which these are all available. I have also where the location is, where it's being parked at, what stockroom is associated with that because it's in stock. If I had one of these in use, I could easily change it to be in use and say okay, and then you'll see that the stock room will go away, and then of course I can change the location. In addition,
we want to assign that to somebody too, obviously, put a name on that.
absolutely.
That's a good manual example. Yes.
So let's see here. Let's give it to Joe Enterprise or Joe Employee. So Joe Employee has this, and as I've assigned it to Joe, you'll see the location has changed for him. Next, we have enterprise model lifecycle. So right now I have the publishers identify that the end of support is going to be in 2026. They gave me 2 years for this particular product, and the end of life we've decided is going to be much longer than 2026. We gave it another, do the math, David, 8 more years or something
8 more
like
years. Yeah.
there you go. We have here where you can have compatibles and substitutes. So in the event I run out of that particular truck, I can switch it up for the Class 8 Freightliner instead. I'm sorry, the Day Cab 2020. What's great about this is that you could also identify the vendors that you use, who's a valued partner versus a strategic. You can have what their list price is and decide who you're going to use. And you can attach knowledge to this, whether it be videos, documentations from your SharePoint. I just had a call where they have everything in bookbinders. So we'll use the Intel doc and get them to scan it in and then add it to the knowledge base so that when the technician goes out to repair this truck, he has information readily available to him to accomplish this. So I'm going to leave it right there for models. What do you think, David?
No, it looks great. The knowledge is really important too, to have that data all in one spot, because when we start to get into like work orders and things like that, you can kind of reflect back on that.
Okay, great. So you know, so much more to cover. Go ahead, David.
No, you got it.
All right, so we have so much more to cover, as you can see, and it's not going to happen here tonight, but it is going to happen as we move forward, and I hope that you really continue to join us, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll steal the screen back and we'll keep the theme of things upcoming coming up. So I hope everyone listening in today got some insights into that, some different solutions we have on the platform to really manage any type of asset you're looking to do in your organization. So, with that said, there's a bunch of upcoming events. We've got a few practitioner workshops. The exact dates are TBD on them, but we're targeting end of October. So for those who have been to some of those workshops so far this year, we're running them. I'm going to actually throw a poll up really quickly. If there's any locations you'd like to see a workshop come on out to, if we get the demand, we'd be happy to come visit your city or where you are to host one. We've got our world forums coming up. So think of those as mini knowledges, knowledge light, if you would. So we've got one out in Dallas coming up in October, one in New York in November, along with a new 4-part EAM webinar series. I think it's running weekly between October 10th and the 5th. We've got another solution consultant here at ServiceNow. She's taken a deep dive into, again, unpacking EAM to help everyone kind of understand all the different use cases and value you could see there. So for some promotion for the folks who did a great job on today's call, we've got, the EAM hotline webinar. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing there.
Yeah, so like kind of what we mentioned earlier, it's really going to be kind of just a deeper dive. We're going to go a little bit deeper. Lillian's a great presenter, but it's only so much EAM you can jam into, how long was that? Half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. Yep. So we're going to take it a little bit deeper. We're going to talk a little bit more about the workspaces in depth, model management in particular, and also go over some of the workflow. The workflow is really like the kind of the shining star. Like everyone's like, oh, it's, like what makes your platform valuable? It's the workflow and all those things that really kind of roll up under those asset types and how all that kind of gets done, how work gets done. And then lastly, Q&A. What we really want to do is take this, kind of on a practitioner sort of angle here. We want feedback. We want to understand what people are struggling with in EAM, what would they like to see, those types of things. And then, hopefully that helps fuel our next one. So this is going to be our kind of our kickoff in October, right around the Halloween timeframe. And then hopefully by November, we'll have some feedback, and we'll get into late November after everyone comes back from Thanksgiving. We'll have some feedback, and we'll start to kind of tailor this more to that practitioner, that viewpoint, and get kind of deeper into that as well.
And make sure, it's Halloween, WEAM. And bring your costumes. I don't know, David, are you going to be a pirate? I think I might be Cinderella.
I don't know. I'll ask my daughters. I'll let them decide for me.
All right, cool.
Awesome. Yes, tune into that. It's going to be a great series. I know I'll be on the list of attendees, probably the first one registered out there, unless someone beat me to it right now. But feel free, keep joining us at these. We're going to be having one next month. Michelle and I will be back on, kind of unpacking what's new in Xanadu. Again, the poll is, I'm going to actually end that other poll right now, launch another one where we like to just collect topic ideas. Again, the community that we're hearing from, you're driving this webinar. So if you've got something you'd like for us to cover, feel free, please post it out here. We'd like to continue the conversation. But with that said, I'm going to turn off the recording here.